The first thing everyone noticed about Amara was her head tie. It wasn't a subtle piece of fabric either. It was bold, brightly coloured, and tightly secured every single day. In a school where trends and appearances dictated social standing, Amara's refusal to let anyone see her hair sparked endless whispers and wild speculation. "Do you think she's bald?" one student whispered to her friend during a break. "No. I saw a bit of hair peeking out once," the friend replied, leaning closer. "But it's weird, right? Who never shows their hair?" Amara sat in the farthest corner of the lecture hall, her head down, flipping through her notebook. She wasn't oblivious to the stares or the murmurs that followed her every move, but she'd mastered the art of indifference. Beneath the head tie, however, she felt the familiar, ever-present weight of her secret: eyes. These weren't ordinary eyes, but countless pairs embedded in her scalp, each blinking and moving independently. They weren't hers, but they saw everything she did. Every moment was a shared experience with the damned souls trapped within her. She had learned to live with the burden, binding the eyes with tight braids and sacred knots to keep them hidden. But every night, as the world slept, she retreated to the school's deserted restroom to redo her work and silence the whispers they carried. The students' curiosity grew day by day. Amara felt it in the lingering gazes and half-formed questions people threw her way. It was only a matter of time before someone got too close, and when they did, she feared the horrors she'd kept at bay would be unleashed. As she packed her bag that evening, a group of girls approached her. "Hey, Amara," one of them said, forcing a smile. "We were just wondering, why do you always wear that head tie? Is there something you're hiding?" Amara froze for a moment before turning to face them. Her dark eyes met theirs, her expression unreadable. "I just like head ties," she replied softly. "It's a personal choice." The girls exchanged skeptical glances but said nothing more. As they walked away, Amara felt the faintest stir beneath her head tie. The eyes were awake. That night, as the campus lights dimmed and the corridors emptied, Amara slipped out of her dorm with a small mirror and a comb. Her heart raced as she made her way to the restroom. The silence of the night was oppressive, broken only by the echo of her footsteps. Locking the door behind her, she removed the head tie. In the flickering fluorescent light, her reflection revealed the truth. Her scalp was a grotesque tapestry of blinking eyes, each one glistening as if it were alive. They turned toward her in unison, and for a moment she swore she heard them whisper. "Soon," they murmured. Amara shuddered, gripping the sink for support. She had kept her secret for so long, but she could feel it unraveling. The question was no longer if her classmates would discover the truth, but when. Amara's head tie became a symbol of fascination in her department. It wasn't long before the boldest of her classmates began pestering her openly. "Amara, who makes your hair?" a boy asked loudly during lunch. A few heads turned, eager to hear her answer. She glanced up from her plate, her expression calm. "I make it myself." "Every single time?" Another girl chimed in, leaning forward. "But why don't you ever let us see it? Are you hiding something?" Amara's hand tightened on her fork, but her face betrayed no emotion. "I don't like exposing my hair. Is that a crime?" Her voice was quiet, but there was an edge to it. The students laughed nervously, but the tension lingered. The questions didn't stop, though. Over the next few days, whispers followed her everywhere, and her classmates became bolder. "Is it a religious thing? Are you bald? Do you have scars?" Amara endured the questions in silence, but the weight of their curiosity was beginning to suffocate her. She knew they wouldn't stop until they had answers, and that terrified her. One evening, as she sat in the library, she overheard two girls talking in hushed tones behind her. "I heard she wears it because her hair's cursed," one said, her voice tinged with excitement. "Cursed? Where did you hear that?" "A senior said she heard it from someone in her dorm. Apparently anyone who sees her hair goes insane." Amara's chest tightened. The rumor was spreading faster than she'd anticipated. She gathered her books and left the library, her mind racing. She had been careful, but it seemed her secret was slipping through her fingers like sand. That night, as the campus quieted and the last of the students retreated to their dorms, Amara made her way to the school toilet. The hallways were dimly lit, the flickering fluorescent bulbs casting eerie shadows on the walls. Reaching the restroom, she locked the door behind her and set her tools on the sink: combs, a small mirror, and a bottle of oil. Her hands trembled slightly as she began untying the head tie, unraveling the layers of fabric that bound her hair. The moment the final layer came off, she felt it. The air around her grew heavy, and the faintest whispers filled the room. She avoided looking in the mirror as she grabbed her comb, focusing instead on parting her hair. The eyes blinked and shifted, some staring at her reflection, others darting around the room as if searching for something unseen. They moved restlessly, their presence oppressive. "Stay still," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The eyes obeyed, but only for a moment. One of them, a large, dark eye near her temple, rolled upward, its gaze locking onto her own in the mirror. A shiver ran down her spine as it blinked slowly, deliberately. "You can't hide us forever," a voice whispered, so faint it could have been her imagination. Amara froze, her breath catching in her throat. She gripped the edge of the sink, her knuckles white. "You're not real," she muttered. "You're not real." The whispers faded, leaving only the sound of her own ragged breathing. She worked quickly after that, braiding the hair into tight, intricate patterns and binding it with thread. By the time she finished, her hands were trembling and sweat clung to her forehead. As she tied the head tie back in place, she felt a wave of relief wash over her. The whispers were gone and the eyes were hidden once more. But deep down, she knew it was only a matter of time before they broke free. The next day, Amara sat at the back of the lecture hall, her head tie securely in place. She tried to focus on the professor's droning voice, but the weight of the stairs around her made it impossible. A sudden movement caught her attention. One of her classmates, a boy named Tunde, had moved to the row behind her. He was leaning forward slightly, his eyes fixed on the back of her head. "Do you need something?" she asked, her voice cold. Tunde grinned sheepishly. "Nah, just curious. You always sit so far back and we never get to see your hair. Thought maybe today you'd surprise us." Amara turned away, ignoring him, but Tunde wasn't easily deterred. He leaned closer, trying to peek under the edge of her head tie. "Stop that!" she snapped, shifting in her seat. "Relax," he said, laughing. "I was just joking." But as Tunde leaned back, his laughter faltered. His face had gone pale, and his eyes were wide with shock. "What's wrong?" one of the other students asked. Tunde didn't respond. He simply stared at Amara, his hands trembling slightly. After a moment, he gathered his things and left the lecture hall without a word. Amara's heart raced as she realized what had happened. He had seen something, just a glimpse, but it was enough. She spent the rest of the day on edge, waiting for Tunde to confront her or tell someone what he had seen. But he didn't show up for any of his classes, and by evening rumors were spreading that he had fallen sick and gone home. Amara felt a pang of guilt, but it was quickly overshadowed by fear. The eyes were becoming harder to control, and now someone had seen the truth. She couldn't let it happen again. Later that night, Amara sat alone in her dimly lit dorm room, the head tie firmly in place as she stared at her reflection in the small, cracked mirror on her desk. Tunde's reaction earlier in the day replayed in her mind, over and over. She hadn't meant for him to see even a glimpse, but the eyes on her scalp were becoming more restless, harder to control. Every day they pushed against her braids and whispered louder, threatening to expose her secret to the world. Her thoughts drifted back to the day her curse began, the day she learned that her hair was no longer her own. She had been just a girl of 13 when it happened, living in her grandmother's remote village. The villagers had always whispered about her grandmother, calling her a keeper of secrets, and accusing her of practicing forbidden rituals. Amara hadn't believed them, until the night she accidentally entered her grandmother's shrine. She had stumbled upon an ancient altar surrounded by candles and strange carvings. At its centre sat a bowl filled with a dark, glistening liquid. Before she could back away, her grandmother appeared, her face a mask of fury. "You shouldn't have come here," the old woman hissed. Amara remembered crying, begging for forgiveness, but her grandmother's expression softened into something else. Fear. "You've seen too much," the old woman muttered. "Now they'll come for you." The next morning, Amara woke with an unbearable itch on her scalp. When she looked in the mirror, she saw the first pair of eyes staring back at her from beneath her hair. Her grandmother explained the curse. The eyes belonged to the souls of those who had sinned against the natural order. They were bound to her now, watching and waiting. "You must never let anyone see them," her grandmother warned. "If you do, they'll be unleashed, and they'll take you with them." For years, Amara had lived with the curse, hiding it beneath layers of fabric and silence. But now, as she stared into the mirror, she wondered if the curse was beginning to unravel. The night air was still and oppressive as Amara lay in bed, her head tie tightly secured. She stared at the ceiling, her body stiff with tension. She had been unable to sleep since the incident with Tunde, haunted by the look of terror in his eyes. As the clock ticked past midnight, she began to drift off. But just as her eyelids grew heavy, she heard it. A faint, insistent whisper. "Amara." Her eyes flew open, her heart pounding. The room was empty, bathed in the pale glow of moonlight filtering through the curtains. She sat up, straining to hear. "Amara, you can't keep us hidden forever." The voice was soft but unmistakable. It came from her head. "No," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Not now. Not tonight." The whispers grew louder, overlapping and multiplying until they filled the room. "They'll find out, Amara. They'll see us. And when they do, it will be your fault." "Stop it!" she cried, clutching her head. The whispers fell silent, replaced by a low, mocking laughter that sent chills down her spine. Amara leapt out of bed and ran to the mirror. She untied the head tie with shaking hands, revealing the eyes on her scalp. They were wide open, darting around frantically, as though searching for something. "You will not control me," she said through gritted teeth, grabbing her comb. She began braiding her hair with swift, precise movements, forcing the eyes to remain still. As she worked, the whispers subsided, and the room grew quiet once more. But the silence was unnerving, filled with the unspoken promise that the eyes would not be silenced forever. The next day, Amara tried to keep a low profile, but it was impossible to ignore the growing curiosity among her classmates. Tunde's sudden absence had only fueled the rumours about her, and now everyone seemed determined to uncover her secret. One classmate in particular, a girl named Sade, was especially persistent. Sade was known for her boldness and her knack for uncovering gossip, and she had set her sights on Amara. "Amara," Sade said brightly during lunch, sliding into the seat beside her. "You're always so quiet. Why don't you hang out with the rest of us?" Amara forced a polite smile. "I'm fine on my own." Sade leaned closer, lowering her voice. "You know, people are saying some interesting things about you. They're saying you're hiding something under that head tie." Amara's heart skipped a beat, but she kept her expression neutral. "People say a lot of things." "So it's not true?" Sade pressed, her eyes narrowing. Amara stood abruptly, grabbing her tray. "I don't have time for this." She walked away, but she could feel Sade's gaze burning into her back. She knew the other girl wouldn't give up so easily. That night, as Amara made her way to the restroom to tend to her hair, she had the unsettling feeling that she was being watched. She glanced over her shoulder, but the hallway was empty. Still, the feeling persisted. And as she locked the restroom door behind her, she couldn't shake the sense that someone was just beyond it, waiting. The whispers started again that night, as Amara worked on her hair in the restroom. The eyes blinked restlessly in the mirror, their movements chaotic, their voices overlapping in low, guttural tones. "We told you," one whispered. "They're watching," another hissed. Amara gritted her teeth, ignoring them as she tightened the braids around her scalp, but the voices grew louder, more insistent. "You think you're safe?" A deep voice boomed, silencing the others. "You can't hide forever." Amara froze, her hands trembling. She had never heard this voice before. It was different, stronger, more malevolent. "Who are you?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. The reflection in the mirror seemed to shift, the eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. The deep voice chuckled, a sound that sent chills down her spine. "You'll find out soon enough." Suddenly the lights flickered, and the whispers turned to screams. Amara stumbled back, clutching the sink for support. The eyes on her scalp rolled wildly, their lids fluttering as if in pain. "Stop!" she cried, her voice echoing in the small room. The lights steadied, and the screaming stopped as abruptly as it had begun. The restroom was silent again, save for Amara's ragged breathing. She tied her head tie with trembling hands and left the restroom, her heart racing. But as she stepped into the hallway, she saw something that made her blood run cold. A single eye, large and unblinking, had been drawn in black marker on the wall opposite the restroom door. Beneath it, someone had scrawled the words, "We're watching you." The next morning, Amara tried to focus on her classes, but the image of the eye on the wall haunted her. Who had drawn it? Did they know her secret? Her paranoia grew throughout the day, and by the time her final class ended, she was on edge. She walked quickly to her dorm, avoiding eye contact with anyone, but she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was following her. As she reached her door, she heard a voice behind her. "Amara." She turned to see Sade standing a few feet away, her arms crossed and a smug smile on her face. "I knew I'd find you," Sade said, stepping closer. "You've been avoiding me." "I'm busy," Amara replied curtly, unlocking her door. "Too busy to explain why you're always sneaking around at night," Sade pressed, her tone teasing but her eyes sharp. Amara's heart raced. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, I think you do," Sade said, her smile widening. "I saw you last night. In the restroom." Amara froze, her hand gripping the doorknob. "You're lying." "Am I?" Sade stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You're hiding something, and I'm going to find out what it is. Everyone's talking about you, Amara. You can't keep your little secret forever." Before Amara could respond, Sadie turned and walked away, her laughter echoing down the hallway. Amara entered her room and locked the door, her chest tight with panic. If Sade had seen anything, even a glimpse, it was only a matter of time before the whole school knew. That night, as she prepared to go to the restroom, she hesitated. The thought of Sade, or anyone else following her, filled her with dread. But she had no choice. The eyes needed tending, or they would rebel. She slipped out of her room and made her way to the restroom, her senses heightened. The hallways were eerily quiet, and every shadow seemed to move. When she reached the restroom, she locked the door behind her and turned to face the mirror. But before she could remove her head tie, she heard a faint noise, a soft rustling sound like fabric against the floor. "Who's there?" she demanded, her voice shaking. There was no response, but the rustling grew louder. Amara's pulse quickened as she turned toward the stalls, her eyes scanning the darkened corners of the room. Suddenly, one of the stall doors creaked open, and a figure stepped out. It was Sadie. "I told you I'd find out," she said, her smile triumphant. Amara backed away, her mind racing. "You don't know what you're doing," she said. "You need to leave." But Sade didn't move. Her eyes were fixed on Amara's head tie, her curiosity burning brighter than her fear. "Take it off," Sade said, her voice low. "I want to see." Amara shook her head. "You don't understand. If you see it—" "What? I'll go insane?" Sade scoffed, stepping closer. "That's just a stupid rumor. Now take it off or I'll do it myself." Before Amara could stop her, Sade lunged forward, grabbing at the head tie. The fabric came loose, and in that moment, the room was filled with an unnatural light. Sade froze, her mouth open in a silent scream as her eyes locked onto the dozens of blinking disembodied eyes on Amara's scalp. The whispers erupted, deafening and chaotic, as the eyes turned toward Sade. "No!" Amara screamed, reaching for her head tie. But it was too late. Sade collapsed to the floor, her body limp and her eyes vacant. Amara tied the head tie back in place, tears streaming down her face. She knelt beside Sade, shaking her, but the other girl didn't respond. The whispers faded, leaving an eerie silence in their wake. Amara knew she couldn't stay. She fled the restroom, leaving Sade behind. Amara ran back to her dorm, her legs trembling beneath her. The cold night air stung her face, but the chill was nothing compared to the fear gripping her chest. Sade's lifeless expression was burned into her mind, and the whispers still echoed faintly in her ears. Once inside her room, she locked the door and sank to the floor, her back pressed against the cool wood. She buried her face in her hands, struggling to catch her breath. "What have I done?" she whispered, her voice breaking. But deep down, she knew the truth. It wasn't her fault. She had warned Sade, told her to leave, but Sade's curiosity had been her downfall. The eyes had acted on their own, as they always did when someone got too close. They were a curse, but they were also a weapon, a terrifying force she couldn't control. Amara stared at the cracked mirror across the room, the faint glow of the streetlights outside casting eerie shadows on its surface. The reflection seemed to mock her, reminding her that this was her burden to bear. Of Sade, lying motionless on the restroom floor. What would happen when someone found her? Would they call the police? Would they suspect Amara? Her thoughts spiraled into panic, but she forced herself to breathe deeply, to think rationally. She couldn't let the fear consume her. She needed to act. She reached for her phone, her fingers trembling as she typed a message into the school's anonymous tip line. "There's a girl unconscious in the restroom near the East Wing. Please help her." She hit send and threw the phone onto her bed, her heart pounding. It wasn't much, but it was all she could do. As the hours passed, Amara sat in silence, her thoughts racing. She knew the eyes wouldn't stop. They were growing stronger, bolder, and now they had claimed their first victim. Stay tuned for the part 2 of this story. If you enjoyed this story, please do well to subscribe, like and comment to our channel to help us grow, and please don't forget to turn on your notification bell so that when I upload a new video, you will be the first to get notified. Thank you.